Warning: do not watch on an empty stomach and make sure your fridge is well stocked. In this battle cooking manhwa, warriors trade swords for spatulas and fight using gourmet skills. If you're into action food webtoons with intense kitchen duels, you're in for a feast. Let the food fight begin.
This is a tale of time and space travel, but unlike before in that restaurant. Now, we talk about this restaurant. Our protagonist doesn't just find himself in a foreign world but also returns to Earth to open a restaurant and retire. Yes, you heard that right. The restaurant of the universe's strongest warrior is now open for business. The story begins with our main character, Sungwoo, sipping a cup of coffee, not tea, coffee, while writing a shopping list for his soon-to-be-opened restaurant. He's been back on Earth for 4 days after countless battles. And now, he just wants to relax and enjoy some rare peace. Pulling out a stack of old DVDs from a box. He takes a moment to savor watching a movie with a steaming cup of coffee, a pleasure he hasn't had in ages. But just as he's delighting in his peaceful plan, the restaurant's door suddenly bursts open. A brash young man with messy blonde hair storms in. Ignoring his rude entrance, he's actually quite striking in a custom suit, tie, and gloves. It seems he's here for a meal, though his approach could certainly use some polishing. Irritated by the interruption, the restaurant owner turns around and announces that the place isn't officially open yet. However, the blonde guy ignores him, sitting back with his legs crossed, and impatiently demands the restaurant's finest dish as if he won't take no for an answer. Seeing this brat's audacious attitude on their first meeting, Sungwoo genuinely wants to deal with him quickly. You may not know this, but Sungwoo is a true movie buff. While irritated and contemplating how to handle this kid, he begins to observe him more closely. The blonde guy seems to notice and turns back, asking why Sungwoo is staring. Sungwoo quickly pretends it's nothing but keeps assessing. He notices that the kid looks frail, with slender arms and legs, likely easy to knock over. And, to top it off, he didn't even notice the closed sign outside. Sungwoo's conscience suddenly stirs. He thinks that this is just some poor, starving kid, pitifully lacking manners or a moral compass. Maybe even brains, given his actions. Seeing that the owner was ignoring his demands, the blonde boy became visibly angry, but Sungwoo still paid him no attention and walked toward the refrigerator. The blonde-haired boy frowned in annoyance, sprang to his feet, and arrogantly pointed to the emblem on his cloak, raising his voice. Do you not recognize the symbol of the First Order? But even this didn't seem to faze Sungwoo, who remained focused on searching through the fridge for food, leaving the blonde-haired boy seething with rage. Realizing he couldn't get the attention he wanted, the boy eventually sat back down in his chair, grumbling about the rudeness of this restaurant, muttering that as long as there was something edible, it would do. Let's rewind a bit to learn about this blonde guy. His name is Baek Hang-hyuk, and he ranks at the top of the First Order's top 100 list. The organization's mission is to eliminate the monsters appearing from spatial gates, which invade and attack Earth. Since these spatial gates began to open, flooding the planet with monsters, the largest and most prosperous cities no longer exist. Places once brightly lit all night, like Seoul, New York, and London, have been destroyed and replaced with new names. Seoul is now called Disaster Zone, Area A, and Baek Hang-hyuk's mission here is to clear out the monsters. As he lights a cigarette and observes his surroundings, another First Order member appears unexpectedly. The two discuss how, 4 days prior, this area was relatively calm, but now monsters are appearing in droves and moving as if they're being pursued. It's likely there's a boss monster somewhere behind these creatures, driving them forward. During the conversation, his scholarly companion suddenly grabs Baek Hang-hyuk's cigarette, insisting he stop smoking, but Baek Hang-hyuk swiftly retrieves his cigarette and looks away. Life, however, isn't always so kind, as he's about to take a puff. It starts raining, putting his cigarette out. Frustrated, he stubs it out and throws it away. He then turns to his teammate and announces, "Tell the front line I'm taking 2 days off. At least until the boss monster raid starts." The bespectacled guy asks why he's suddenly taking a break, especially at such a late hour. Hang Hyuk responds that his bad mood and hunger have compelled him to recharge his weary body from working overtime. A perfectly reasonable excuse. Really, after wandering for a while, Baek Hang Hyuk finds a lively street still ablaze with lights and heads toward a newly opened cozy restaurant. Being a food enthusiast, he knows his stomach will growl in protest when stressed from battle. As he reaches the restaurant door, he muses that if the food's terrible, he'll take down the sign himself. But if it's good, he'll berate the restaurant for making him eat round the clock. Clearly, this is one unruly guy with a somewhat twisted soul. Decisively, he reaches for the door handle but notices a closed sign. This unfortunate turn of events is something he refuses to accept. He doesn't want a sign to obstruct someone as famous as himself. So he grabs the sign, crushes it, laughs triumphantly, and kicks the door open. This marks the beginning of his first special meal at this restaurant. Back at the Warriors restaurant, Sungwoo is still debating which ingredients to use for his first guest's meal. Finally, he chooses a pristine cut of meat. Smiling contentedly, he prepares to make a nourishing dish for the world's top-ranked blonde, in need of assistance, at least. In Sungwoo's eyes, he places the meat on the counter and begins preparing it. This cut is the shoulder meat, located between the neck and wing, of a red dragon, a high-grade, even supreme ingredient. After studying the marbling carefully, Sungwoo draws his knife and slices it thin. Almost like beef steak, red dragon meat is imbued with the spirit of fire, giving it a rich, spicy taste. To enhance the flavor, he adds some fruit juice for a touch of luxury. Today, he uses grape juice. He adds asparagus, garlic, shiitake mushrooms, and a little hot butter to create a magnificent dish for his first guest. As he cooks, Sungwoo smiles contentedly, thinking how much he enjoys the process. But suddenly, something unexpected happens. The meat lets out a scream. Ah! This startled Baek Hang Hyuk, who was waiting to enjoy his meal. He turns around, wondering if he'd just imagined the sound, as it seems the meat had just yelled. Unfazed, Sungwoo just smiles, continuing to prepare the dish, calmly saying, "You must have misheard." He continued to sprinkle pepper over the freshly completed steak, adding a final touch with ingredients like asparagus, mushrooms, ginger, and garlic. Carefully plating the dish, he presented it beautifully before placing it in front of Hang Hyuk. The steak, with its appealing presentation, seemed delicious just by sight alone. Yet, only a taste would reveal its true quality. Hang Hyuk stared at the steak, searching for any imperfections, but found none, which somewhat annoyed him. He reevaluated his opinion of this restaurant owner, realizing that the man's steak cooking skills were no joke. Faced with Hang Hyuk's discontented expression, Sungwoo simply smiled, observing as the young man prepared to taste the dish. Unable to find any faults, Hang Hyuk gradually returned to his usual self, acknowledging that the steak was quite well made, especially in terms of the grill control. Picking up his knife and fork, he eagerly prepared to take his first bite. The steak released a gentle fruit fragrance, perfectly seared, making it evident that this was an exceptional piece of meat. However, before eating, Hang Hyuk looked up and asked Sungwoo for the dish's name. Upon hearing it was called roast steak, Hang Hyuk raised an eyebrow, never having heard of such a name before. Yet he decided to go ahead and taste it anyway. As Hang Hyuk attempted to cut into the steak, he noticed something strange. The meat refused to be sliced. Despite all his strength, as the world's strongest individual, he couldn't make a cut. Eventually, after exhausting all his energy, he was forced to surrender. Bewildered, Hang Hyuk asked Sungwoo why the steak was so hard to cut. Sungwoo, calm as ever, offered to help, cutting the dragon meat as he thought to himself. This kid is so weak he can't even cut a piece of meat. The steak in front of Hang Hyuk was no ordinary meat, it was roast dragon meat. A rare and challenging ingredient to prepare. Going back in time, Royce was once the great elder of the Red Dragon clan and the trusted aide of the Demon King for 1800 years. A powerful dragon who wielded tremendous authority and strength, dominating and terrifying countless beings. In their final showdown, though a formidable opponent, Royce was ultimately slain by Sungwoo with a single Decisive slash. To his credit, Royce was strong enough to survive precisely one strike before falling. Back to the present, Sungwoo effortlessly sliced through the Royce dragon steak, feeling quite pleased, while Hang Hyuk mumbled, thinking perhaps the knife was dull or that he was simply too tired. However, as soon as he muttered these excuses, Hang Hyuk was shocked to see Sungwoo cutting the steak with ease. Startled but hungry, he grabbed a slice of steak and bit into it without a second thought. Instantly, his eyes lit up, his entire body trembled, and flames erupted from his mouth, setting the restaurant ablaze with dragon-like fire. It was a spectacular sight. Truly unbelievable. Desperately covering his mouth, Hang Hyuk struggled to contain the inferno within. In a daze, he thought, "Am I breathing fire?" Good heavens, the fiery taste was so overwhelming that tears welled up in his eyes as he uttered a feeble complaint. "This doesn't taste good at all." The restaurant owner stood there with arms crossed, his expression a mixture of disdain and amusement as he smirked. "I made it terrible on purpose." This unexpected remark left Hang Hyuk speechless, and he stammered, asking why, but Sungwoo didn't respond right away. Instead, he slammed his hand down on the table and declared with pride, "A truly remarkable dish is one made for survival, a dish that imparts strength." This was the creed of this restaurant's chef. Momentarily stunned, Hang Hyuk found himself unable to argue. His face turned red as he struggled to spit out the piece of meat. Yet the awful taste clung to him persistently. With no other choice, he clenched his teeth and swallowed it down. As the meat passed down his throat, his body instantly heated up, waves of fiery energy surging through him, spreading throughout his entire being. His meridians quivered, and every vein seemed to be boiling until, suddenly, the young man collapsed to the ground, falling unconscious as if he were a snuffed-out lamp. Sungwoo leaned on his hand, watching the boy lying unconscious on the restaurant floor with a twinkle of amusement in his eyes. An hour passed, and finally, Baek Hang Hyuk's eyes fluttered open. He found himself still sprawled on the ground, while the restaurant owner sat nearby, looking on the verge of dozing off. Taking a deep breath, Hang Hyuk staggered to his feet, rage overtaking his face. "You poisoned me on purpose. Were you trying to kill me?" he roared, clenching his fists before lunging forward with a powerful kick. But Sungwoo casually caught his foot with one hand, as if it were no more than a tossed ball. At that moment, Baek Hang Hyuk, ranked as the world's top hunter among the strongest 100, suddenly felt an unfathomable weakness within himself. With a tired sigh, Sungwoo remarked disinterestedly, "So weak. You just ate 3-star dragon meat, which boosts health, strength, and fire resistance, plus grants dragon abilities, and yet, no improvement at all?" Hang Hyuk's face flushed from red to pale white as he pointed to himself in disbelief. "Weak? Me?" Sungwoo's reply was a short, cutting nod, his smile full of cheer. "Yes, you." The curt response landed like a slap, igniting Hang Hyuk's fury even further. He clenched his teeth, backing up to launch a punch with all his strength at Sungwoo. Just as his fist closed the distance, Sungwoo raised a single finger, giving a light flick. Instantly, Hang Hyuk was flung backward, crashing to the floor and once again passing out. With an exasperated sigh, Sungwoo pulled out his phone, looking up information on Baek Hang Hyuk from the First Order. After a few minutes of reading, he shook his head, disappointed by the words on the screen. So this unconscious boy, collapsed on the floor, was supposedly humanity's top hope, the #1 hunter? A kid this weak, counted as the world's best hope? The Earth is doomed. He shook his head, deciding he wanted no part of this mess. He had come here to open a restaurant, to retire in peace, not to get caught up in saving the world. But then, an idea suddenly dawned on him, and a sly smile crept onto his face. Sungwoo glanced down at Hang Hyuk, still lying limp on the floor, his eyes glinting with a dark plan. Seeing the boy's weak state, Sungwoo's smile took on a sinister edge as he muttered, "Well, kid, looks like I just found a way to make you stronger, but it's not going to be easy. You'd better be prepared." It seemed that fate had something difficult in store for Hang Hyuk, with a future full of challenges ahead under the watchful eye of this mysterious restaurant owner. Ladies and gentlemen watching this video, if you're wondering why our restaurant owner Sungwoo possesses such remarkable strength, then join me as we turn back time to uncover the distant history where his harsh journey began. Around 40 years ago, Sungwoo found himself in a completely foreign world, a place rife with savage monsters and dark magic. This world was embroiled in a fierce war against the Demon King, a merciless and unimaginably powerful being capable of obliterating an entire dimension with a mere flick of his hand. When Sungwoo first set foot in this realm, he had nothing. He was an ordinary person, at level 1, without any combat skills and no assistance whatsoever. But amidst the chaos of war, through grueling training and relentless life or death battles, Sungwoo grew stronger, little by little. Each day, the scars crisscrossing his body were the marks of the arduous journey he endured. And finally, after unyielding effort, Sungwoo attained strength capable of overpowering all and became the hero who could change the course of the battle. In the decisive battle, Sungwoo and his 3 comrades faced the Demon King. The space around them glowed with surging mana as they clashed. With a devastating downward slash, Sungwoo delivered the fatal blow that ended the Demon King's reign, cutting down the world's greatest threat. This glorious victory not only liberated the realm from the Demon King's oppression but also elevated Sungwoo to level 255, the highest level achievable in this world. This victory inscribed Sungwoo's name into legend, making him an indomitable hero. When the battle ended, Sungwoo and his comrades gathered to rest after the long, grueling days steeped in blood and sweat. Suddenly, a brilliant light appeared in the sky, and a beautiful goddess with golden hair, sharp eyes, and an enchanting smile appeared in the heavens. She was Gaia, the goddess who had summoned heroes from other worlds to fight the Demon King. She had come to honor their grand victory, hoping they would accept her gratitude. However, instead of the appreciation she expected, Sungwoo looked at her with cold, piercing eyes, almost with contempt. "Are you smiling?" Sungwoo asked coldly, fixing his gaze on the goddess Gaia. His question stunned her. Sungwoo stepped forward, his voice cutting like steel as he spoke. "You bestowed ultimate weapons, unparalleled strength, and top-tier equipment on everyone else. But I received nothing." His words were not just a reprimand. They carried the fury of someone who had to face all challenges alone without a shred of support. As he spoke, Sungwoo placed his hand on the hilt of his sword, his entire body radiating powerful mana that made the ground tremble. Gaia began to sense the real threat he posed, her expression shifting as she tried to evade the question by explaining that she had exhausted too much divine power summoning other heroes, and therefore couldn't grant Sungwoo any support. This explanation only fueled Sungwoo's rage, and he shouted, "Want me to strike you down right here?" The words rang out sharply, and at that moment, Sungwoo truly prepared to draw his sword. Fortunately, his large orc friend quickly wrapped his arms around him, while the others shouted for him to calm down. Gaia seized the opportunity to rise beyond Sungwoo's reach, trying to steady herself as she thought, "How can a mere human be this powerful?" Though shaken, she finally gathered herself and decided to reward the heroes. She asked each one what they wished for. First, the orc friend wished to be sent to new battlefields with a noble cause. The blonde mage refused any reward, feeling that the journey with his comrades had been reward enough. Sungwoo, overhearing, grew annoyed and grabbed the mage's face, joking, saying things like, "That doesn't embarrass you?" In response, the blonde mage merely smiled, saying that the most important thing was the bond of friendship they'd forged during their arduous journey. When it came to the elf, he wished for the ability to freely travel across dimensions and to wield weapons. Gaia hesitated briefly but ultimately agreed, with the condition that he must have a compelling reason. The elf replied with steadfast eyes, expressing his desire to bring freedom to oppressed races across various dimensions and to spread the light of revolution everywhere. Sungwoo also agreed with this wish, and the two exchanged friendly compliments, leaving Gaia a bit uneasy, though she could do nothing about it. Finally, Gaia turned to Sungwoo and asked for his wish. Everyone fell silent, waiting for the answer from this legendary hero. What would he wish for? Or would he choose something grander and more unexpected than anything any of them could possibly imagine? Sungwoo, our protagonist, after countless adventures and possessing a treasure trove of wealth and rare items, now finds that riches, fame, and power come to him effortlessly. Furthermore, with his peak-level abilities, he holds the vast power to traverse dimensions and conquer any world with a mere snap of his fingers. But because of this, Sungwoo finds himself indifferent to all the things others might dream of. For him, there seems to be no goal that truly matters, or at least, That's what he thought. In the midst of these endless musings, he suddenly recalls those early, arduous days when he first set foot into this world, with nothing but ragged clothes, bare hands, and a painfully empty stomach. Vividly, he remembers walking into an unfamiliar village and trying to start from scratch. The memory of him stumbling into a small roadside tavern, hoping just for a modest meal to warm his stomach, comes flooding back, as he took a seat and listened to the diners around him ordering their usual meals. Sungwoo overheard them requesting the usual, with a look of satisfaction. Guessing that this might be the tavern's most popular dish, he ordered the same, his heart quietly anticipating, and then, the plate was brought before him, rolled meat with mushrooms, drizzled in an enticing green sauce, elegantly garnished with fresh, crisp vegetables. Before him lay a culinary masterpiece so beautiful that Sungwoo's eyes welled up with emotion just at the sight. Unable to resist, he immediately picked up his knife and fork, plunging into the meat with the reverence of someone deeply grateful after days of hunger. But as that piece of meat touched his tongue, his initial excitement vanished, replaced by a surge of nausea that shot up to his brain. The exquisite-looking meal was nowhere near as delicious as he had imagined. In fact, it was quite awful. Yet, from that moment, somewhere deep within Sungwoo, a decision was slowly forming, though he didn't yet realize it. Returning to the present, amidst these vivid memories, Gaia, his ever-patient companion, was tirelessly attempting to break through Sungwoo's focus. She tugged at his cheeks, teased him, playfully prodded, trying to get his attention. Unable to stand it any longer, Sungwoo suddenly seized Gaia's hand, his gaze cold as he said, "I was reminiscing about the time I was first summoned here. I didn't even have a single potion." Then, to Gaia's horror, Sungwoo turned his back, looking off into the distance with a determined glint in his eye, and announced, "I'm going back home, to Earth, to open a restaurant." A stunned silence filled the air. Everyone froze at his words, their eyes wide with shock and confusion. Someone finally blurted out, "Why a restaurant?" Sungwoo, with his usual calm demeanor, responded in a low voice, "I want the people of Earth to experience the dishes of this world." The declaration left everyone even more bewildered. They began to think he might be mad. Gaia, who understood this world best, was so shocked that she broke into a sweat and couldn't help but ask, "Do you realize that the food here is known to be the worst among all dimensions?" At this, Sungwoo fell silent, with a sharp glint in his eyes. He grasped his sword and struck it against the ground with a loud thud. A powerful tremor reverberated, causing Gaia to flinch and recoil. He looked at her, his gaze blazing with determination mixed with fury, and said, "That's exactly the reason." Everyone fell silent, instantly thinking, "This guy must be insane. I can't accept that I'm the only one who had to endure that flavor without sharing it with the whole world." Sungwoo continued with a blissful smile. Thus began Warrior Restaurant, a one-of-a-kind establishment with beautiful, tantalizing dishes that could enhance one's power, yet tasted unbelievably terrible. After the portals connecting Earth with other dimensions emerged, a new profession was born, hunters. These individuals possessed exceptional strength and abilities, able to combat the increasingly numerous and dangerous monsters. This newfound power began appearing once the gates had opened. Among the world's top hunters, there is an organization gathering the best, known as First Order, and ranked first in its top 100 is a young man with unmatched power, a blonde-haired guy. Yet, this number one in the First Order is currently on his knees, bowing in apology before the owner of a newly opened restaurant, none other than Sungwoo himself. Sungwoo looked at the blonde-haired youth with displeasure and asked flatly, "Are you the type of kid who pulls these kinds of stunts in other restaurants too?" Without waiting for a response, Sungwoo continued, voice cold, "Don't bother answering, I know exactly what kind of person you are." Facing Sungwoo, the blonde-haired youth, Hanghyuk, leader of First Order, was trembling in fear. His mind spun with anxious thoughts. Is this guy Korean? Or is he a foreigner? If I make a mistake, won't I be taken out? Compared to him, I'm nothing more than an ant before a giant. As Hanghyuk remained steeped in his fear, Sungwoo suddenly set down his coffee cup and threw out an unexpected proposition. "I'll turn you into a completely different person." Before he could grasp the meaning of those words, Hanghyuk heard Sungwoo continue explaining, "You're a member of First Order." So you must become even stronger to protect this planet. And immediately, Sungwoo launched into a lengthy, philosophical lecture filled with concepts that few could easily comprehend. Breaking into a cold sweat, Hang Hyuk nervously asked, "What if I refuse?" The moment he finished his question, Sungwoo rolled up his sleeves, revealing a dark aura of mana that made Hang Hyuk shudder with terror. Instantly, Hang Hyuk stood at attention, shouting his acceptance of Sungwoo's mentorship. And thus, the seemingly endless lecture on philosophy resumed, leaving Hang Hyuk feeling as though his ears were about to burst. With blood trickling from them in sheer agony, he could only sit in silence, sweating and on the verge of tears. Unsure how long the lecture would go on, perhaps enough time to build an entire skyscraper. Unable to bear it any longer, Hang Hyuk shakily raised his hand to interrupt and asked Sungwoo about his previous job. The answer came as no surprise. "I used to be a high school philosophy teacher." Hang Hyuk sighed internally, thinking, no wonder he talks this much. After a few more exchanges, Sungwoo gently clapped his hands, smiling kindly, and promised to teach Hang Hyuk about the value and significance of food. At the mention of food, Hang Hyuk couldn't contain his irritation and pointed at the roast steak dish in front of him, boldly stating, "If you call this food, then it might as well be a chemical weapon." The moment he finished his criticism, Sungwoo's expression changed instantly. His eyes grew icy as he looked at Hang Hyuk and said in a low voice, "Do you think you should talk like that in front of the person who put so much heart into preparing this dish? You're acting like a complete idiot." This rebuke left Hang Hyuk even more terrified as he stammered an apology. With no other option, he reluctantly picked up his fork, trembling as he asked, I really have to eat this, don't I?" Sungwoo coldly replied, "No wasting food." Sweating profusely, Hang Hyuk pleaded, "I really can't eat this." But Sungwoo, with a face full of empathy, gently patted his shoulder and encouraged, "Don't worry, you'll get used to it." The tension in the small room suddenly shattered as Hang Hyuk, filled with anger and desperation, shouted, refusing the dish before him. His face flushed, eyes blazing. He snarled, "This isn't food, I can't eat this." Without hesitation, he clenched his fist around the plate, preparing to throw it, but Sungwoo swiftly grabbed his arm. Sungwoo's gaze turned icy, his eyes radiating an unyielding sternness. In a low voice, he said, "You could." Before Hang Hyuk could react, Sungwoo unexpectedly shoved a piece of roast dragon meat into his mouth. In an instant, the flavor spread, and the rage in Hang Hyuk's eyes gradually faded, replaced by a blank stare. Moments later, he collapsed, unconscious, under Sungwoo's eerily calm gaze. The overwhelming flavor and powerful energy of the meat had left Hang Hyuk completely drained. Sungwoo looked down at the unconscious Hang Hyuk, a faint look of contemplation crossing his face. He dragged him down to the basement, which had been prepared for a special mission. When Hang Hyuk woke up, he would begin a harsh training regimen set by Sungwoo to make him stronger, not just to survive, but to protect the sanctuary that Sungwoo had built as his retirement refuge. 2 days after Hang Hyuk's disappearance, at the headquarters of ISAC, the organization overseeing the First Order, a girl with glasses and a tense expression was deep in thought. Hang Hyuk was a crucial link in the organization, and his sudden absence filled her with worry. She decided to summon Min O'Keefe, ranked second in the First Order's hierarchy and captain of the support team, to locate Hang Hyuk in case he'd encountered unforeseen danger. When Min O'Keefe received the news, he merely shrugged, seeming unbothered, suspecting that Hang Hyuk might be hiding out or lost somewhere, possibly with a girl. But a larger issue was looming. Only a day remained before the battle against the boss of Disaster Zone A, and Hang Hyuk's absence was starting to frustrate Min. After considering, he decided to search for him himself. He visited each of Hang Hyuk's usual haunts, but found no trace of him. Finally, Min had to rely on his unique skill, energy detection. Closing his eyes, he focused, instantly sensing Hang Hyuk's faint energy emanating from a small restaurant in the neighborhood. Sensing something unusual, Min made his way to the restaurant and, without hesitation, used his unlocking skill to slip inside. Moving quietly, his sharp eyes scanned every corner. The path leading to the basement became clear. Min carefully descended the stairs, taking care not to make a sound. Yet, just as he stepped onto the last stair, a deep, chilling voice echoed from behind him. Do you know what it means to be an intruder? The authoritative tone made Min freeze. And he turned around to see a man in simple clothes standing directly behind him. It was the restaurant owner. Min immediately tensed, unable to hide his curiosity. How had this man managed to get behind him without him noticing? Actually, there was no then. In the restaurant basement, Hanghyuk, drenched in sweat, was tirelessly chipping away at hard stones with a pickaxe. He was putting every ounce of effort into breaking each rock as if they were his key to freedom. The steady clink, clink of the pickaxe rang out, blending with Hanghyuk's heavy breathing. Exhausted, Hanghyuk suddenly heard footsteps coming from the stairs. He looked up, his tired eyes lighting up upon seeing Min O'Keefe standing there. Overjoyed, Hanghyuk cried out, "I knew you'd come to save me." He rushed over, his voice filled with hope and excitement. But Min stayed silent, his gaze solemn as he slowly picked up a pickaxe from the corner of the basement and said coldly, "I'm also trapped." Min's words hit Hanghyuk like a slap to the face, and his fragile hope was nearly crushed. Stunned, Hanghyuk's tear-filled eyes slowly dimmed. Despair overwhelmed him as he realized that even the second strongest in the First Order couldn't escape this terrifying restaurant. And so, under the dim light of the basement, the two strongest members of the First Order became reluctant miners. After hours of relentless digging, Min collapsed to the ground, drenched in sweat, breathing heavily, his vision blurred from exhaustion and anger as he wondered how he'd let himself end up in this mess. He couldn't understand why that airheaded blonde, Hanghyuk, had picked a fight with such a formidable person as the restaurant owner. But before he could fully express his frustration, Min had to clutch his aching back, groaning from the strain of all the labor. Meanwhile, Hanghyuk, who seemed to have adjusted to the physical work, sat down calmly and asked Min how he would compare the restaurant owner's strength to Hakan, the 6th-ranked warrior in the First Order. Min replied that, if Hakan was level 85, then the restaurant owner's strength was difficult to gauge. As he spoke, Min picked up the pickaxe, seemingly ready to continue digging. Suddenly, he swung it toward Hanghyuk and yelled, "But first, I need to split open the idiot who angered that monster." The pickaxe only grazed Hanghyuk's hair before stopping. Min was too drained to control his arms. Hanghyuk, giving him a sympathetic look, took the pickaxe from Min and said, "Which is why I'm already covering for you." Min, irritated, snapped back, "Shut up, this is all your fault." But just then, Hanghyuk shifted to a more serious tone, reminding Min that if they didn't escape soon, the monsters in Area A wouldn't sit idle, and the boss would surely appear. Min's anger subsided, and he nodded in agreement. Hanghyuk was right, if they stayed trapped, not only their lives but the entire Area A would be in danger, as they were the highest-ranking hunters there. In the midst of their conversation, Hanghyuk's stomach growled loudly, embarrassed. He tried to excuse it, saying he was hungry from overworking. After a moment of thought, Min suggested, "We should go apologize to the restaurant owner and beg to be let out. Maybe, if we explain, he'll understand." Hanghyuk was taken aback, unable to believe that negotiating with someone as powerful and imposing as the restaurant owner could work. But Min reassured him, "I'm sure it will. He has very pure mana." With anxious hearts, they approached Sungwoo, prepared to apologize. To their surprise, before they could say anything, the restaurant owner replied casually, "Letting you out?" "Sure." Hanghyuk froze, unable to believe his ears, and shouted, "Really?" Min, more composed, bowed his head in gratitude. But suddenly, Sungwoo asked with a wry smile, "You're Min O'Keefe, aren't you?" Baffled as to how the restaurant owner knew his name, Min was stunned by the unexpected answer. "I looked you up online." Both of them stiffened, quickly remembering that in this age, a simple Google search could reveal everything. Still dazed, they watched Sungwoo put on his apron, announcing that he'd treat them to a meal before they left. Hearing this, Hanghyuk immediately slammed his hand on the table, shouting in protest, "I'm not eating, it's terrible." Sungwoo only chuckled, looking at him as if he had anticipated this reaction, and asked, "If you had the choice, would you pick good food or bad food?" Without hesitation, Hanghyuk replied, "Of course, the good stuff." Sungwoo smiled, "Then I'll make grilled salmon in foil." Turning away, Sungwoo started preparing the dish. Hanghyuk's mood instantly shifted, his eyes sparkling as if he'd forgotten his hunger and fatigue. Observing him, Min asked skeptically, "Wait, you already chose?" Feeling a pang of doubt, Min wondered why Sungwoo had allowed them to choose so easily. After careful thought, Min decided to go for the bad food, hoping to understand the deeper meaning behind this choice. Sungwoo looked momentarily surprised, seeming to enjoy Min's peculiar decision. He quickly took out salmon from the fridge, skillfully preparing each fillet, seasoning it with cooking wine, onions, king oyster mushrooms, and other ingredients. His movements as precise as those of a true artisan. Although starving, Hang Hyuk couldn't resist taunting Min. "You really are foolish. Why'd you choose the bad stuff?" Min sighed, half joking. "I'm starting to regret it. Yours really does look delicious." As a food connoisseur, Hang Hyuk couldn't help but question. Usually, salmon should be left for 5 to 10 minutes to eliminate any fishy smell. But he's doing it completely differently. Min, watching Sungwoo's every move intently, quickly replied, "Don't you see he's adjusting the spices and sprinkling wine and salt on the outside of the fish longer than usual? This is definitely a novel way to remove the odor." Both of them continued to observe Sungwoo's careful preparation. The restaurant owner wrapped the fish tightly in foil, placed it in a deep pan, covered it, and turned on the heat, moving to the final cooking step. When he was finished, he turned to Min and asked, "Do you enjoy liver or kidney dishes?" Min replied, "Just a little. I have a sensitive stomach." Hearing this, Sungwoo pondered briefly before commenting, "That's not exactly an ideal condition for sustaining combat stamina." Sungwoo's comment sent Hang Hyuk into a fit of laughter, as he taunted, "Exactly, this guy can fight for 5 minutes before he's panting and lagging behind." The remark made Min furious, but he held his temper, given they were in Sungwoo's restaurant. While Min and Hang Hyuk bickered, Sungwoo considered a suitable meal for Min. After some thought, he decided to cook something light and easy to digest. Seeing this, Hang Hyuk smirked. "So much for all the hype. Turns out he's just making porridge." But then he laughed and patted Min's shoulder in mock sympathy, saying, "Lucky for you, Min, you can't mess up porridge, right?" Min sighed, accepting his fate in silence. As the aroma of Hang Hyuk's salmon began to fill the room, Min's porridge simmered evenly. Sungwoo opened the foil, and the fragrant scent of salmon spread across the room. He plated the beautifully cooked dish in front of Hang Hyuk, whose eyes lit up, his delight palpable. "This is it. This is real food." Hang Hyuk carefully took a bite, and it was as if he'd been lifted to another realm by the rich, overwhelming taste. Nearly in tears of joy, he exclaimed, "Someone who cooks this well can't possibly be a bad person." Pounding the table, he expressed his utter excitement. Min could only watch in exasperation, scolding Hang Hyuk, "You're getting carried away again." Observing Hang Hyuk's enthusiasm, Sungwoo chuckled and placed a small bowl of sauce on the table. "Well then, make sure to finish it all." Upon seeing the sauce, Hang Hyuk couldn't contain his joy, giving a thumbs up and saying, "With dipping sauce, this is perfection." Both Sungwoo and Min shook their heads, breaking into a slight sweat over Hang Hyuk's obsession with food. While Hang Hyuk relished his salmon, Sungwoo returned to the kitchen, carefully ladling the porridge into a bowl before setting it in front of Min with a warm, friendly smile, though it doesn't look very appetizing. "Enjoy your meal," he said. And dear readers, that dish was right there. Min was stunned, unable to believe his eyes as he looked into the bowl of porridge before him. It was a translucent, slimy concoction that glistened with an unsettling greenish hue, like something straight out of a horror story. As he savored his delicious salmon, Hang Hyuk glanced over and asked Min, "Is that porridge?" Meanwhile, Min could only stare at the bowl in front of him, wanting to scream. "If it were you, would you dare eat a bowl of porridge with such an odd, pale green color?" "If it were me, I probably wouldn't." Hang Hyuk looked at Min's bowl and teased, "Did they put uranium in this?" Sungwoo, unimpressed, shot him a look and replied, "I'm sorry, but there's nothing of the sort here." Hang Hyuk wasn't convinced. "Then did you add some kind of energy drink? The color is so strange, it doesn't look like food." He shook his head in defeat. Min, though wary of the bowl of porridge, took a moment to analyze it. He carefully scooped up a spoonful. Examining it closely, he noticed the shimmering color and gleaming texture. This wasn't ordinary food. It was pure magical essence. This was no regular dish. it was a type of restorative elixir. Like a spiritual medicine. Taken aback, Min looked at Sungwoo with surprise. As though to ask a question. But Sungwoo only raised a finger to his lips, signaling him to keep quiet. Understanding that Sungwoo wanted to keep the meal's nature a secret, Min decided to take a taste and test its effects. As he swallowed the porridge, the magical energy spread through his body, reviving him, but just a moment later, the horrible flavor hit him, making him gag. The taste was so awful that Min shuddered uncontrollably. While beside him, Hang Hyuk continued to savor his salmon, blissfully content. Recognizing the deeper meaning of Sungwoo's dishes, Min understood. Delicious foods provide a pleasurable experience, but the bad ones hold special effects, like restoration. However, to benefit from these special effects, customers had to endure the potentially unbearable taste. Shaking and grimacing, Min resolved that he had to finish the dish if he wanted his body fully restored. Life or death, it's fate. Min braced himself, scooping up another spoonful of the disgusting porridge, his face twisted in horror at the flavor. Hang Hyuk, next to him, continued enjoying his salmon, completely satisfied. After about 30 minutes, Min sat dazed, enduring the torture of the porridge. But a faint smile started to appear on his face. The dish's effects seemed to be kicking in. He felt rejuvenated. Full of energy, Hang Hyuk, just finishing his own meal, looked over and asked loudly, "Are you okay?" Min, initially pale, regained his color. He placed a hand on his stomach, feeling his insides had healed, and his strength fully returned. A wave of happiness washed over him, a feeling he hadn't had in ages. Min stood up and bowed, thanking Sungwoo for the special meal, leaving Hang Hyuk shocked and confused. Sungwoo responded softly, "It was nothing." Finally, someone appreciated the true value of the Warrior's restaurant. The two shared a look, one of gratitude and one of satisfaction, as if they'd found some harmony in life. Meanwhile, Hang Hyuk sat beside them, completely clueless. What is going on here? What's this weird vibe? For someone as simple and cheerful as Hang Hyuk, it was hard to grasp the kinship between Sungwoo and Min from this shared, meaningful experience. Finally, Hang Hyuk called for another salmon dish without hesitation. The people around him stared, amazed at his seemingly bottomless stomach. When he had cleared his 23rd plate, he leaned back in his chair, his belly swollen, looking satisfied as if he were a champion who'd just defeated his toughest opponent. While Hang Hyuk was lost in his victory, Min calmly told Sungwoo they should leave and stop mining, since the boss of the portal might appear tomorrow. Min even suggested that Sungwoo could assist them. Upon hearing this, Hang Hyuk threw an arm around his friend, grinning smugly. "No need. The boss here is strong. If he wanted to help, he would have already. Everyone has their reasons." Surprised by Hang Hyuk's rare insight, Sungwoo gave a small approving nod as Hang Hyuk continued explaining that if Sungwoo stepped in, things would be too easy, and they would lose their chance to train and grow stronger. Hearing this, Min agreed, while Hang Hyuk stood up, shouting, "We'll overcome the challenge and become stronger ourselves." Sungwoo watched as Hang Hyuk cheered with confidence, clapping while maintaining a skeptical look. Seeing his friend's burst of self-confidence, Min chuckled. "It's hilarious," causing Hang Hyuk's spirits to drop. Annoyed, Min continued, "Back Hang Hyuk, if the boss intervened, the Hunter Association would know, and he'd be ranked in the first order. Then you'd be pushed from 100th place to 101st. Losing your top 100 spot. Is that what you're worried about?" Hang Hyuk froze, unable to deny it, and stood silent in defeat. Sungwoo broke into a light sweat, while Hang Hyuk stuck his tongue out sheepishly, saying, "Hee hee, I got caught." Min, slightly frustrated, explained to Sungwoo, "He's always like this." After a moment of thought, Sungwoo seriously mentioned he'd seen kingdoms fall for relying solely on one hero. His words seemed to resonate deeply with the two boys, reminding them that real strength comes from within, not from relying on others. Both thanked Sungwoo, apologizing for the trouble, and prepared to leave. Sungwoo smiled, inviting them to visit often without charge, especially Hang Hyuk. Hearing about frequent visits, Hang Hyuk remembered the flaming steak, which had once haunted him, and quickly gritted his teeth, responding, "No way," as he hastily closed the door on his way out. On their way back, they chatted, But before continuing, a humorous detail needs to be clarified. In a previous video, Hang Hyuk was introduced as the head of the First Order Top 100. But in reality, he was indeed top 1 from the bottom. This is why he's so attached to his precious ranking on the leaderboard. As they walked back to HQ, the two discussed Hang Hyuk's over-the-top eating habits. Min couldn't help but comment, "You eat like a pig." Annoyed, Hang Hyuk snapped back, "What? Would you rather I eat that horrid porridge? It's awful." Min merely smiled, watching his friend's outburst, thinking to himself, "A smell, huh? Someday you'll realize, you'll understand that it was the luckiest opportunity of your life." With that, they headed back to prepare for the next day's battle. The next morning, in Zone A the boss had appeared, a colossal wolf with 6 eyes, roaring to assert its dominance. On top of a high-rise, Min and Hang Hyuk, 2 elite hunters, watched carefully. When a helicopter arrived, Min reminded Hang Hyuk, "It's your turn." The blonde loaded a bullet into his gun. Smiling confidently, "Are you ready?" he asked. They readied their weapons, bracing themselves, and leapt down together, charging straight toward the boss. The battle promised to be intense. To see the outcome, tune in to the news. Shortly after, the morning news from Zone A aired. The announcer reported that a dangerous monster had appeared. But thanks to superstars Baek Hang Hyuk and Min Oki-fi, it had been defeated. The South Korean government even decided to award a medal to the entire team. However, the announcer hesitated to mention that Hunter Baek Hang Hyuk declined an interview after the battle due to digestive issues from overeating. On TV, Sungwoo, sipping a coffee and enjoying a fresh pastry, smiled to himself, thinking, "Well done." Taking a bite, he mused, "Lucky me, if I went to the portal, my power could disrupt the area, causing the monster to sense danger and move to unprotected zones, endangering civilians. So, I'll leave protecting this world to the hunters." Then Sungwoo leaned back on his sofa, sipping coffee and thinking to himself, "This world is in your hands." After breakfast, Sungwoo stood up, stretched, preparing mentally for the week leading up to the restaurant's grand opening. As he looked out the window, he noticed a familiar sight, the little cat feet outside his door. Quickly, Sungwoo opened the door and greeted the cat, who had a red scarf around its neck. It turned out to be a delivery cat. The little guy held up the package, saying, "Hello, your delivery is here." Once the gray-furred, charming cat entered the restaurant and handed over the package to Sungwoo. It politely asked, "May I take a seat?" With permission granted, it quickly hopped onto a chair and began licking its paw just like any playful cat. For those who may not know, this special breed called Erupos resembles a common cat in appearance and habits, yet possesses remarkable intelligence. Notably, they have more taste buds than humans, which makes them excellent chefs. Their superior sense of smell and hearing also surpasses human limits, and they genuinely enjoy caring for others. Wow, amazing, right? They can be janitors, medics, and even treasure hunters, making them indispensable companions for warriors. But there's one frightening characteristic about the Erupos, and that is, their over-the-top care, to the point that they often turn once strong warriors into lazy pigs. Spoiled slobs who just lie around with their bellies up, literally. That's why they've earned the nickname, the cats that destroy warriors. The Erupos' adorable appearance also fuels competition over which one has the best or cutest Erupos. This was a sore spot for Sungwoo, especially since everyone around him had an Erupos companion, while he did not. He used to cry in despair, wishing, practically begging, the goddess for an Erupos since everyone else had one except him. The goddess he prayed to was none other than Gaia, who deeply cares about everyone, except Sungwoo. Apparently, to the point that he once nearly gave Gaia a one-way ticket to Hades, out of frustration, making her cry in apology. Back to reality, Sungwoo shot the Erupos a disgruntled look as he recalled that past trauma. But quickly regaining his composure, he asked, "Did Rentano order pudding slim? But why would they send an Erupos? I'm just a restaurant owner. If fur goes flying everywhere, how am I supposed to keep the place running?" The charming gray cat promptly stood on the table, placing its front paws on the surface, and said, "My fur doesn't shed at all. Go ahead, try pulling it." Sure enough, when Sungwoo tried tugging, not a single strand came loose. Sungwoo was surprised, petting the cat as he asked, "So how did you get here?" The gray Erupose proudly crossed its paws like a human and replied confidently, "I defeated a god to get here." Hearing this, Sungwoo nearly fell over in shock, exclaiming, "What?" With a smug grin, the gray-furred Erupose scratched its chin with its paw, recounting how it had approached the cat god to request permission to become an assistant for a warrior. Despite putting on its cutest face, it was still rejected. Heartbroken, it slumped over and began to cry. The cat god explained, "You're dangerous. I can't even tell how dangerous you are, so I can't let you go." With a touch of arrogance, the Erupose had replied, "That's because I'm super cool. Compared to other species, I'm way more impressive." To clarify, this Erupose was of the battle-oriented type, not the usual support type. It was a rare breed within its species. Faced with such self-assuredness, the cat god could only sigh, thinking, "I have to kick this brat out of here. If it stays, it'll only get even more cocky. And anyway, if I don't let it go, it'll probably just escape to find a warrior anyway." While the cat god pondered, our cute, mouse-gray Erupose sat weeping in the forest, lamenting its fate and wondering why it couldn't find a warrior. Then, a butterfly delicately landed on a flower before fluttering back into the sky. Watching this, a sudden thought sparked within Erupose. It realized that the problem wasn't with the warriors, but with itself and its own lack of abilities. That's when Erupose decided it needed to improve itself. With eyes blazing with determination, it understood the path it had to take. It started training itself relentlessly, practicing martial arts, honing its battle skills, reading, and studying like a scholar. It trained non-stop to become a warrior and a scholar, skilled in everything from combat to cleaning and cooking. Determined to become a super cat capable of anything, it threw itself into rigorous training day and night. Back to the present in the warrior's restaurant. Sungwoo was sweating nervously after hearing the story and asked, "So, after all that training, you attacked and defeated the cat god?" Proudly, Erupose replied, "That's right. After defeating the cat god, I gained my freedom and could go find a warrior for myself." Hearing this, Sungwoo broke out in a cold sweat, thinking, "What kind of creature is this?" Meanwhile, the Erupose continued boasting of its triumphs, demonstrating a few battle moves with its front paw. Sungwoo, bewildered by why Renato would send him such a monster-like creature, hesitantly said, "Actually, I'm retired, no longer a warrior, so I don't really need an assistant." In response, Erupose immediately put on an irresistibly adorable face. As a devoted cat lover, Sungwoo couldn't resist, so with a light cough, he offered, "Well, if you're interested in working here, I could hire you as an employee." The moment it heard this, Erupose leapt up in joy, bowed deeply with utmost politeness, and said, "Please take care of me from now on." Both sides were happy with the arrangement. After a bit of thought, Sungwoo chose a name for the cat, gently patted its head, and said, "Do your best from now on, Nabi." And so, Nabi officially became a team member of the Warriors Restaurant. A true super employee. But there's no joy in life that lasts forever. From afar, two figures were silently watching the soon-to-open restaurant. They were investigating the new establishment that had suddenly appeared. One dedicated to serving warriors, and deemed it an enemy that had to be taken down. With an imposing air, the two began approaching, ready to confront the Warriors Restaurant. Let me introduce you to two newly arrived characters. Restaurant owner Lejong, Park Dal-soo, and cafe owner Vane, Otae Sik. Both men stood at the entrance of the Warriors Restaurant, brimming with confidence. After a moment of observation, they began to speak. "A restaurant serving coffee too, huh?" Park Dal-soo remarked sternly. "Quite cocky, don't you think? Like they're trying to show us up," replied Otae Sik. The two of them whispered to each other, "Should we use first order to flip this place upside down, just like that cafe before?" So, who are these bold characters who've appeared out of nowhere? However, they suddenly noticed two congratulatory wreaths placed next to the restaurant door. Out of curiosity, they stepped closer to see that one was from Baek Hang-hyuk, and the other from Min Ok-fi. The notes read, "Please make only delicious food," and "Congratulations on your grand opening." Seeing the names of two of the most influential figures in the area, the two owners were immediately taken aback. their eyes widening in shock. They broke into a cold sweat as they realized that the owner of this restaurant seemed to have connections with some very important people. But they didn't back down. After a moment of acting angry, they exchanged a sharp look and made a bold decision. This restaurant is irritating. Let's go prepare and come back later. Wow, they're pretty brave, aren't they? Planning to return well prepared for a showdown. The moment they made this declaration, the two scurried off as fast as they could. Quite the talkers. However, they'd barely taken a few steps before they suddenly felt a light tap on their backs from two cat paws. Turning around, they saw an adorably cute cat before them. It was Nabi, who cheerfully asked, "Are you two customers?" The two were dumbfounded to see a talking cat. And before they could respond, Nabi went on, eyes bright with excitement. "If you're customers, please come in." Without waiting for a reply, he grabbed both men by the collars and pulled them right inside the restaurant. With a greeting style like this, no customer would ever escape. Once seated, the two began whispering again, one guessing it was some kind of monster, the other suggesting it was a well-trained beastman. Meanwhile, Nabi was positively thrilled to have customers to serve, rushing off to bring them 2 glasses of water. However, the two men, being true to themselves, went back to scheming about how to ruin and slander the restaurant. The shorter, rounder owner ran his finger across the table, looking for dust, but to his disappointment, he found not a single speck, not even a stray cat hair. The place was spotless, practically sparkling. As Nabi set the glasses of water in front of them, he added cheerily, "I don't shed." The two immediately grew curious, patting Nabi's fur to see why it didn't shed, though they were still puzzled by how the place was kept so unbelievably clean. They wondered, do they use a cleaning service? Nabi grinned and answered, "I do all the cleaning myself." Hearing this, the two men grew jealous, slumping onto the table, and sighed, "I wish we had a cat like this." Before the jealousy could settle in, Nabi plopped the menu onto the table and encouraged, "Please, take a look and order." The two immediately began whispering again, shifting to Plan B, since Plan A had failed. They requested to order today's special. To give you some context, the special menu in a 5-star Michelin restaurant is usually a dish directly prepared by the head chef. It's not just expensive, the standards for ingredients and preparation are incredibly strict. If a special dish doesn't satisfy the customer, the restaurant's reputation will suffer. Back to the story, while the two were eagerly anticipating a mistake to be made, Nabi didn't seem to care at all and cheerfully shouted, "I've got your order," and hurried off to the kitchen. Sungwoo, the restaurant's owner, opened the kitchen door, beaming as he said, "They want the special." "Huh? Got it." Then, putting on an apron, he entered the kitchen, thrilled, as it was rare for customers to request the special. Seeing Sungwoo's face and silhouette as he cooked, both restaurant owners were visibly impressed. The portly Park stared in awe, mesmerized by Sungwoo's form and technique, while the tall, skinny Oh turned to him and whispered, "What did you just say?" Park, however, remained silent, still entranced by the image of Sungwoo holding up a large pan effortlessly, his muscles flexing as he moved with seamless skill. It was a sight that looked almost like a painting. Annoyed, Oh finally shouted, "Mr. Park, I respect your taste, but have you forgotten why we're here?" This snapped Park back to reality, and he quickly stammered, No, I was just surprised by his skill." Then, he cleared his throat, trying to regain his composure, thinking, this restaurant owner really has a captivating presence. It's my first time seeing someone cooking with such passion and enjoyment. After showcasing his culinary expertise, Sungwoo placed 2 plates of special stir-fried squid rice in front of the guests. Each plate was beautifully divided, creating a yin-yang presentation with 1/2 rice and the other half stir-fried squid. Looking closely, they realized this dish was no ordinary creation. Knowing the restaurant's specials were made with only the freshest ingredients of the day, they realized finding any faults in the ingredients would be impossible. Now, their only option was to taste it and assess the flavor. Both took a spoonful and tried the dish. After the first bite, Oh quietly asked, "What do you think?" Park simply replied, It's good." Without another word, the two continued eating in silence, engrossed, spoonful after spoonful, until both plates were spotless. Finished with their meal, they leaned back in their chairs, patting their full stomachs and exclaiming, "That was delicious." Park praised, "The dish stays true to the basics. As Koreans, we can't deny this flavor." Oh, the cafe owner nodded in agreement. His cafe and light food offerings like this are quite different from how we run things. Park also agreed, "Exactly, very different from my European-style cuisine." Both men happily pulled out money to pay, bid goodbye to Nabi the cat, and returned to their businesses in high spirits. As they walked, they chatted cheerfully, even suggesting they should visit often and bring gifts to the restaurant owner to build a good relationship. And so, Warrior's Restaurant turned two potential adversaries into good friends, thanks to Sungwoo's culinary skill. Meanwhile, the protagonist was engrossed in reading a piece of paper when Nabi curiously asked, "What's that?" Sungwoo handed the paper to Nabi, explaining that it was a blacklist sent by Hanghyuk, which included the names of the two guests they just served. Smiling proudly, Sungwoo remarked, "I defeated them with just a plate of stir-fried squid rice. Does that count as talent?" Nabi jumped up excitedly, replying, "The warrior is the best." Sungwoo patiently explained further, "But we also need to respect our neighbors. My strategy from the beginning has been to make this restaurant coexist peacefully with those around us, without affecting any other business. Living in harmony is very important in this world. No matter the circumstances, we must never forget the principles and spirit of a warrior." And with that, one of the guiding values of Warrior's Restaurant was established. 40 years ago in the world of Terra, which was 9 years ago in Earth time, Sungwoo was a gladiator slave standing in a grand circular arena that resembled an ancient Roman Colosseum. Sword in hand, he faced off against other warriors, taking them down one by one to the wild cheers of the crowd, who chanted for him to finish off his opponents. Only one other fighter remained, injured and lying on his back. Sungwoo stood over him, silent. The downed gladiator urged him, "Just end it." Sungwoo gripped his sword, raised it high, the blade angled downward, ice cold and unyielding. In one swift motion, he thrust his sword down, but not to strike a killing blow. Instead, he pierced his opponent's shoulder. The fallen gladiator looked up in shock, but Sungwoo simply gave him a faint smile and said, "I won't do it. I'm tired of this. We're nothing but slaves to war." The crowd erupted into jeers and threw stones at Sungwoo, but he remained calm, clutching his stomach, slowly sinking to his knees as he stared upward, seemingly longing for Earth, for his homeland. Despite the angry shouts and chaos filling the arena, all Sungwoo could think about was how much he wanted a bowl of kimchi stew. Back in the present, at the Warrior's Restaurant, Min had just finished a bowl of kimchi stew. He gently wiped his mouth and politely thanked Sungwoo, the owner, but it seemed Sungwoo was lost in his memories, oblivious to Min's words. It wasn't until Min waved his hand in front of Sungwoo's face and called out that he snapped back to reality, scratching his head in apology and explaining that he was just recalling the past. Min smiled and complimented the stew's taste. Meanwhile, Nabi, ever efficient, whisked away the empty bowl, balancing it on his head as he scampered back to the kitchen. Sungwoo, standing behind the counter, turned to Min. "This is your first time trying this, right?" Min returned a gentle smile, nodding. "I'm American, so I'm still getting used to kimchi," he said, taking the teacup Sungwoo handed him. Despite the soft rain outside, the atmosphere in the restaurant was peculiarly calm and cozy, enveloping the two men, and a cat, in an oddly peaceful warmth as they quietly sipped their drinks. "It's so peaceful and wonderful here," Min remarked. After finishing his tea, he stood up, thanked Sungwoo for the meal, and made to leave, but then he paused, recalling something, and turned back to remind Sungwoo that the municipal inspector would be coming soon. Erupos could handle greeting customers, but they'd need to verify that he posed no risk to the public. As he spoke, he sat down across from Nabi. Hearing this, Nabi thought, "I haven't harmed anyone, I even clean up really well." Sungwoo chuckled, explaining to Min that someone had previously come by to instruct him on how to apply for a returnee certification. Min laughed, patting Nabi on the head, and said, "Haha, they even have a guidebook for that. They're really trying to adapt to all the returnees." Sungwoo smiled back, nodding in agreement. A good way to handle things, he agreed. After that, Min left, but before stepping out completely, he cast a quick glance back at Sungwoo, who was tidying up behind the counter. Worry crossed his mind as he thought, the inspector coming this time is also a returnee. Let's hope there won't be any accidents. Later that evening, after Nabi had greeted the last of the day's guests, he happily swept the front patio, humming to himself as he held the broom. Suddenly, a middle-aged man with silver hair leaned down behind him and gently said, "Excuse me." Startled, Nabi jumped high, yelling, "Oh my god!" Causing the man to blink in surprise at the cat's reaction. Nabi was furious. He swung his broom around as if he were about to attack the strange man. "Why did you suddenly appear like that?" he yelled. The middle-aged man was a bit startled. "I'm so sorry," he quickly apologized. "It's just a professional habit." "Are you scared?" "I was just surprised to see an Erupose here." Seeing the man apologize repeatedly, Nabi gradually calmed down. Curious, he asked, "How do you know about us?" And it was no wonder, because not everyone on Earth knew about the Erupose species. The silver-haired man nodded. "That's right, I used to be a warrior." At the word, warrior, Nabi's eyes lit up with excitement. He happily jumped up and down, excitedly saying, "Oh, really? A warrior? It's an honor to meet you." The man smiled and bent down to ask, "But, are you working now?" Hearing that question, Nabi wanted to call his boss to talk. But after a moment's thought, he decided that it was absolutely not a good idea to disturb his boss while he was enjoying his movie. So, Nabi turned to the man with a sad expression and said, "I'm sorry, the restaurant is closed." The man's face fell slightly. Seeing this, Nabi couldn't help but feel sorry. His eyes were watery, as if he were about to cry. Finally, with a kind heart, Nabi patted his chest and said loudly, "But if you're hungry, I'll cook you a meal personally, not as the restaurant." Hearing that, the man happily grabbed Nabi's paw and said gratefully, "An Erupose cooking? What an honor." Erupose were known for their cooking skills thanks to their unique characteristics. So Nabi was very confident, until the man asked him to cook kimchi soup. Nabi's face turned pale and his hands trembled. This dish was truly a big challenge for a cat like him, as kimchi was a dish from Earth, not from the land of Terra where he had lived. Nevertheless, Nabi tried his best. He ran to get a chair so he could reach the stove, and began to cut the meat, the basic ingredient for the dish, which included pork leg and kimchi. After the meat was cut and the kimchi was ready in 2 cups, Nabi carefully put the meat into the pot to start cooking the broth. By the way, if you want to cook broth from meat or bones, I have a little tip. When the water boils for the first time, the dirt will float to the surface. Let the water boil for about 5 to 10 minutes for the foam to rise. Then turn off the heat. Pour out the water and clean the pot, meat or bones. After adding new water and starting to cook the second time, the broth will be clear and no longer have a bad smell. When the water just boils, reduce the heat to the lowest level to simmer. It is best not to cover the pot when simmering for a long time. The water will be clear and naturally sweet. After putting the meat in the pot to make the broth, Nabi started thinking about the next step. However, he suddenly panicked when he realized he didn't know how to season the dish, as the necessary seasonings included fish sauce made from small shrimp, salt, and sugar, things he had never used before. Confused, Nabi decided to put everything in at once. After a lot of effort, he thought everything was probably okay, he just needed to add some vegetables later to finish. However, suddenly a thought crossed his mind and made Nabi jump. He felt like he had missed something, and decided to add onion to the soup. Thinking that it couldn't be wrong, he pulled out a large onion to prepare for cooking. However, when cooking kimchi soup, people usually use green onions, not onions, so when Nabi brought the dish to the guest, he himself felt that something was wrong, disappointed for not being able to complete the dish as requested by the guest. He lay flat on the floor and groaned, "I think there's something wrong here." The middle-aged guest also looked at the soup and commented, "I feel the same way. Something's not right, because this is almost kimchi porridge, not kimchi soup. But anyway, you've tried your best." Hearing that, Nabi was somewhat comforted when the guest was not upset and started to eat. Just then, the kitchen door opened. Sungwoo, after watching his favorite movies, walked into the kitchen and was surprised to see a guest. He said, "You don't look like a customer. A friend?" Nabi, who was lying disappointed, curled up in the corner of the kitchen. groaned that this was a guest from Terra. The silver-haired guest stood up, apologized and introduced himself as a returnee. Looking at the guest more closely, Sungwoo noticed that his face was as hollow as Min's when he first arrived here. Perhaps he had suffered a lot while in Terra. Therefore, Sungwoo gently said, "I understand. You want to eat kimchi soup, right?" Hearing that, the guest quickly apologized and said he didn't want to bother, as the restaurant was closed. However, Sungwoo just smiled lightly, walked closer and said, "This restaurant is open whenever the owner wants, so I'll make this dish for you." Then, Sungwoo took the tray of food that Nabi had cooked and brought it into the kitchen. As he walked, he thought, after all, this is the first meal of a returnee, so I must treat him well. With a confident look, Sungwoo rolled up his sleeves and prepared a special meal for someone in the same situation as him. Someone who had once been lost in another world and found his way back. When Sungwoo stepped into the kitchen, he got right to work preparing kimchi stew with the poise of a top chef, though in reality, he was just frying meat in an iron skillet. He took a cut of pork shoulder, the top tier of cheap but tasty meat, then began to chop it up and stir-fry it over high heat. As he flipped the pan with a speed and skill that looked like a reincarnated talent, Nabi, the little cat, peeked around the corner, his eyes wide with curiosity, as if he were watching a live performance. Before he could peek much longer, Sungwoo turned around with a sly smile. "Quit hiding, come here, I'll show you how it's done." Nabi blinked in surprise but then bounced over. As excited as a kid with a new toy, Sungwoo started explaining each step. First, throw the meat in to sear. Then, add the kimchi to let its tangy, spicy flavor mix in with the meat. To keep the pork from smelling too strong, add some soybean paste, the miracle cure for people who can't handle alcohol. Nabi nodded thoughtfully. "So you add soybean paste so people who don't drink alcohol can eat it, right?" Sungwoo chuckled and nodded. "Exactly. For some who avoid alcohol, we use soybean paste instead. Plus, the garlic in the kimchi helps handle the meat's smell too." Nabi noted it down diligently, his eyes sparkling. Finally, Sungwoo added thin slices of green onion to the skillet, stirring everything together, and seasoned it with salt and a splash of shrimp sauce. He poured in some water and let it come to a rolling boil. Nabi, who was eagerly jotting down everything, marked the important parts with stars and finally jumped up with excitement, saying, "So that means I can make kimchi stew too now." Sungwoo just laughed, telling him to go ahead and give it a try next time. Soon, the meal was served. A pot of steaming kimchi stew, a sunny side-up egg, and a side of pork to go with some white rice. When the silver-haired customer saw the tray of food, he couldn't contain his surprise and muttered, "Huh, so I'm not the only one who misses this dish. You too?" Sungwoo smiled and replied, "It's funny, I never missed it on Earth. But ever since coming to Terra, I can't stop thinking about kimchi stew." The customer nodded in sympathy, blinking back tears as he tasted the familiar flavors of home. It seemed like one of those rare moments when food could take you back to your childhood faster than any internet connection. After the meal, the customer started opening up, sharing that he'd lived in Terra for 13 years, which was about 6 years in the real world. Sungwoo sighed with a deep understanding because he'd been in Terra for 40 years already. Or roughly 9 Earth years. It seemed like there were no rules to this world-hopping business. It was like playing the cosmic lottery. Once he'd calmed down, the silver-haired customer proudly added that he was a level 51 hunter. Sungwoo was genuinely impressed, thinking, wow, that's no small feat, since level 51 was a respectable silver rank. Bordering on expert, the customer looked off into the distance, deep in thought. This place is nothing like Terra. The way they handle dimensional gates here is so strict that it makes me miss Terra even more. Sungwoo was stunned and asked, "So you didn't come back by choice?" The silver-haired man gave a wry smile, glanced over, and replied, "Not exactly. It was during a dungeon exploration that I got hit by an expulsion spell." This information left Sungwoo speechless. This customer hadn't returned the usual way. He'd been thrown back to Earth by some kind of dimensional magic. It was like winning the grand prize in a lottery no one actually wanted to play. Sungwoo chuckled, "Haha, well, aren't you lucky then?" The customer gave an embarrassed laugh. "Maybe, but for me, it wasn't such a lucky thing." The customer's eyes grew distant and sad. And Sungwoo, sensing the man's grief with the wisdom of a seasoned traveler, quickly realized that Terra had become his second home. The truth was, he had a wife and a pristine white Erupos cat he adored back there. Just thinking about that cozy little home, where his gentle wife and loyal cat waited, made this once fearsome warrior, who had braved Terra's fiercest battles, break down in tears, bawling like a child. Nabi, Sungwoo's little cat, was just as moved by the scene as he rummaged through his pouch. Producing a tiny handkerchief and offering it to the tearful guest, Sungwoo sighed, glancing around with a weary expression. Having been single for so long, listening to people go on about family was hardly his favorite pastime. After a moment's thought, he boldly spoke up. If you want to return to Terra that badly, I might be able to lend a hand. The silver-haired guest, mid-sob, immediately snapped his head up, eyes wide with disbelief, and Nabi's jaw practically hit the floor. After a second of stunned silence, the guest leapt to his feet, slamming his hands on the table with an echoing smack. Are you serious? I'd go back in a heartbeat. Sungwoo gave a smug smile and snapped his fingers. In an instant, a dimensional gate crackled open beneath the guest's feet. Nabi's eyes went round as he watched in shock, and the guest had just enough time to blink in astonishment before Sungwoo, with a parting grin, said, "It was a pleasure meeting you," and, poof, the guest was gone. Whisked back to Terra in the blink of an eye. Afterward, Sungwoo dusted off his hands with a casual air, though with a slight hint of irritation. Honestly, I really hate it when people cry in front of me. Nabi, still a little shaky, started sweating as he murmured, You'd better be careful. Opening dimensional gates on a whim might make the goddess mad." But Sungwoo waved him off, looking bored as he picked at his ear. He wanted to go back, so I sent him back. If the goddess shows up, I'll punch her or something. Nabi, face scrunched with worry, stammered, So you sent him back to Terra just because you were annoyed? For the record, our main character here was powerful enough to take on the goddess herself if he felt like it. So she'd probably think twice before reprimanding him. Having finished his little customer support service, Sungwoo casually strolled toward the kitchen, telling Nabi to close up shop early since today had been busy enough. Nabi cheerfully went back to work, while Sungwoo decided to treat himself to a light meal. However, as soon as he sat down, preparing to dig in, Nabi shyly asked if he could take the plate of food down to feed the slime pudding in the basement. Sungwoo immediately clamped down on his food tray, flatly refusing. "No, I'm eating this." This left Nabi slightly disappointed, as he secretly thought his own cooking probably wasn't good enough, and he didn't want Sungwoo to suffer through it. But Sungwoo just chuckled, picked up the tray, and took a hearty bite, visibly pleased. Holding the spoon, Sungwoo couldn't help but recall the old days, back when he was a slave warrior trapped in Terra's dark dungeons. That was a time when all he had was darkness and no hope, until one day, a soldier appeared, clad in armor that looked like a Roman uniform, his smile as bright as the sun. The soldier introduced himself as John, a friendly guy who had come to offer Sungwoo a special tray of food, kimchi stew. Sungwoo stared in disbelief, caught between joy and surprise, and asked John where he had gotten it. John laughed heartily. "Everyone from your world says it's a must-have, so I bought it for 1 coin." Gleefully opening the lid, Sungwoo found himself staring into the pot with bewilderment. "This isn't kimchi stew. It's kimchi porridge." John scratched his head sheepishly, looking embarrassed. Is that so? Was I swindled?" But to Sungwoo, even kimchi porridge was as precious as gold. He smiled and thanked John, promising to eat plenty to keep his strength up. Sitting in that gloomy prison, Sungwoo savored each spoonful of kimchi porridge as if it were the finest delicacy in the world. Now, back in the present, he felt like he was tasting a bowl of that kimchi porridge all over again. Savoring the flavor, Sungwoo murmured to himself, "So it wasn't green onions but actually leeks. Now I get it." Eating with satisfaction, Sungwoo found himself reminiscing about those challenging days in Terra. If it weren't for kind souls like John, he might have turned into a cold-hearted warrior, driven only by fighting and bloodshed, instead of the man now sitting here munching contentedly. Meanwhile, somewhere on Terra, the silver-haired guest sat in a field of grass, bewildered, trying to make sense of why he'd been expelled back to Terra again. On a side note, although I've eaten plenty of kimchi stew, I've never had kimchi porridge. Maybe it's time to make a bowl like this and see what the difference is. The next day, at the wholesale market in District A, the air was bustling and loud. Practically a festival. Among the throng of people, we have Sung-woo and his assistant, Nabi, a graceful cat with a definite knack for picking good food. The two were munching and bickering, arguing over what to eat next. With a wise look, Nabi declared that they should finish the hot dogs first before deciding on anything else. Strolling leisurely and admiring the traditional stalls, Sung-woo couldn't help but sigh. Shopping at the market has a way better vibe than the supermarket. Don't you think, Nabi? There was something about this place that made him feel like a part of this simple life, where the smells and shouts of vendors filled the air. Just then, as he was lost in his admiration, Nabi's eyes suddenly lit up with an unmistakable sparkle, the look of a cat that's just found treasure. Nabi darted forward like an arrow, leaving Sung-woo with no choice but to follow his explorer companion. Soon enough, Nabi led him to a genuine treasure, a massive clam. Sung-woo's eyes went wide as he took in the sight, and it took him a while to remember where he'd seen one before. That's right, this was a Hera gigas clam, the type the Gigantes tribe used for entertainment. The surprises didn't stop there. Sung-woo turned to the stall owner to ask where the clam came from, and she proudly declared that her husband had picked it up. Picked up? Sung-woo thought to himself, seeing as this thing must weigh at least 200 kilos, fit for a giant to carry. And yet, she said her husband simply picked it up. Well, okay, she explained that her husband was a robust hunter, so maybe it did make sense? After some gawking and consideration, Sung-woo decided to buy the clam for his restaurant, despite the stall owner insisting it was only for display because nobody knew how to open it. Never mind that, he wanted it, so he was getting it. He also threw in an order for 10 mackerels. When asked why he was buying so many fish, Sung-woo scratched his head and said he was opening a restaurant, so he'd need the quantity. Hearing this, the stall owner promptly pointed a finger at him and shouted, "How are you going to open a restaurant with only 10 fish?" Before he could react, Sung-woo found the stall owner tossing various fish into his bag herself, leaving him a bit sheepish, while Nabi was practically bursting with joy, clapping his paws with a wildly satisfied look on his face. Fish is fish. No cat would turn that down. Back at the restaurant, Sung-woo placed the clam on the kitchen counter with an air of reverence, and Nabi sat nearby, gazing at the sea monster alongside him, wondering just how they'd handle it. After some careful calculation, Sung-woo braced himself, gently prying the clam open, only to be astounded by the sheer amount of meat inside. It was easily several times larger than Nabi. The scallop part was terrifyingly massive. Sashimi is the only way, Sung-woo muttered with determination. He sliced thin, paper-like slices of meat, dipping them in Korean chili sauce. Taking a bite, his eyes lit up. This would be amazing with a shot of soju. With the clam's meat and remaining organs, Sung-woo enthusiastically set to prepare an authentic American clam chowder, promising instant hangover cure after tonight's sashimi and soju feast. That was the plan, but his eyes suddenly gleamed with a sinister sparkle as he noticed a small black pouch tucked within the clam. He grinned in satisfaction. Now this here is a poison sac, the real deal for hunters. Whoever eats this and lives will have their poison resistance boosted to godly levels. His tone was confident, like he was hosting a special sale with a bonus offer, if you survived. Hearing this, Nabi's fur bristled, muttering to himself, "Master is truly scary." Sung-woo's face grew increasingly devious as he pondered how to cook and preserve this monstrous dish long-term, just in case any brave souls dared to try it. Meanwhile, somewhere far away, a hunter shuddered as if a ghost had just passed through him. Little did he know, a chef was currently plotting a gourmet specialty beyond his wildest imagination. Back in the kitchen, Sung-woo dove into his preparations when, suddenly, Min swung the door open and stepped into the restaurant, pulling out a chair to sit at the table. He asked what interesting thing they were up to. When caught sight of the colossal clam, Min couldn't hide his surprise and mentioned that this type of clam could be found near the river. The moment Min mentioned the river, Sung-woo set his knife down, turning around with interest. But Min's face turned serious as she recounted a recent story. Just 2 days ago, someone reported hearing a loud noise near the drainage pipes. And hunters found a small spatial crack right at that spot. As soon as he finished speaking, Sungwoo's expression turned dead serious. A spatial crack? Any day now, this place could become a portal, and all sorts of monsters could come pouring through. Upon hearing mention of the special task force, Sungwoo immediately understood the situation and realized why Hanghyuk hadn't been around the restaurant lately. While Sungwoo and Min continued exchanging information about the dimensional rift at the river, Nabi swiftly brought out an exquisitely arranged plate of scallop sashimi. Placing it on the table, Min picked up a slice, marveling, "Your knife skills are amazing. The sashimi is cut so thin you can see right through it." A quick side note here, not many chefs around the world can manage this. Thin yet perfectly even. When sliced this finely, the sweetness of the scallop truly shines. Only those fortunate enough to dine with a top chef can appreciate this level of precision. Though it doesn't come cheap, typically, such chefs serve only one customer at a time. Back at the restaurant, Sungwoo suggested Min try dipping it in Korean chili paste or soy sauce with wasabi. But Min opted for plain soy sauce, saying he wasn't a fan of wasabi. As he reached for the soy sauce, Sungwoo's mind began to spin with complex issues, the dimensional rift, the people who have returned to Earth after crossing dimensions, and now the discovery of the giant Haragigas clam in the river. The Gigantes, a proud and extremely violent race with power levels surpassing 90, usually ate this type of clam. Could the rift this time be connected to them? But how could all these strange, seemingly random events keep occurring in succession? As he thought this through, Sungwoo broke into a cold sweat, wondering if he himself might be the cause of all this. It was possible, after all, someone with immense power, having crossed into another world, might unintentionally disrupt energy flows, creating temporal and spatial rifts. While Min was happily savoring the scallop sashimi, a tragic drama was unfolding in a cold, damp underground sewer nearby. Baek Hanghyuk, the big blonde kid with a knack for whining like a child, was curled up in his sleeping bag, groaning pitifully. This sight did not escape the sharp gaze of his purple-haired assistant, who sighed, then suggested, "If you're too busy sulking to write your resignation letter, I'll be happy to draft it for you." Hanghyuk was outraged, leaping up, but all he got was her frosty stare, which made him feel like he'd made the biggest mistake of his life. Wasting his day off, whining in a sewer. Tearfully, Hanghyuk whimpered, "Is this what being first order is all about?" His assistant sighed in exasperation. Then what should the first order be doing? Instantly, Hanghyuk leapt up, shedding his sleeping bag, and activated his superstar power. In a radiant glow as though he were on stage, he announced dramatically, "They should be battling monsters in epic style, broadcasting the whole thing live for everyone to witness. Naturally, I would be the hero admired by the entire world." Here's a bit of backstory. Hanghyuk's power, superstar, boosts his strength according to the crowd's attention. This has only added to his delusions, making him always yearn to shine like a superstar. His dream? Nothing short of epic battles, superhero scenes, and hordes of fangirls swooning around him. His answer didn't cheer things up in the slightest and only made his assistant want to curse in her head. She coldly replied, "You could just quit this and join some reality show. You know." The words had barely left her mouth before Hanghyuk's spirits dropped from Cloud 9 back to Earth, and he retreated into his sleeping bag, groaning like a child denied a candy bar. Despite her immense irritation with his attitude and personality, the assistant resumed her serious demeanor, continuing to monitor the spatial crack nearby. While observing, she had to admit he wasn't entirely wrong. They had no idea how long they'd be waiting here. So, she suggested they call in another team to take over so he could get some rest. But before she could finish, a deafening sound echoed through the space. The crack suddenly erupted, transforming into a full-blown portal of doom. This was a crisis. All nearby troops immediately scrambled to the site. Hanghyuk sprang out of his sleeping bag, weapon at the ready, bracing for danger. Meanwhile, his assistant rushed to check the scanner to gauge the portal's level. But when she looked, she gasped in horror. The scanner had cracked. What did that mean? It meant the portal was beyond S-class, a gate of destruction, an apocalyptic threat they had no chance of handling. She collapsed to her knees, trembling in terror, understanding that the entire city could be erased without a trace. Around her, people were also beginning to grasp the situation, a wave of panic spreading. Just then, a hand gently rested on her shoulder. Hanghyuk, with a determined gaze and voice full of resolve, said someone needed to enter the portal before it fully opened. Flashing a confident smile, he proposed an emergency course of action under Article A Section 43. Subsection 1 of the Criminal Law Act, Oops. Anti-Portal Regulation Act, to use a stabilizing device to contain the portal's expansion until reinforcements could arrive. He assured everyone that they just needed to hold it off temporarily. The purple-haired assistant quickly tried to stop him, suggesting that attacking together might be more effective, but Hanghyuk waved her off, saying if Min were here, teamwork would work, but otherwise, the others would only get in his way. Placing both hands on her shoulders, Hanghyuk declared he'd take the stabilizer device and enter the portal alone to buy them time. He firmly instructed her to head to the city outskirts, to Chongjeonggung Road, and find a restaurant named Warrior. She was to report the situation to the restaurant's owner and bring them back as quickly as possible. To the assistant's surprise, Hanghyuk smiled confidently, adding, "Just mention my name and beg him to help. If everyone wants to live, that's the only way." Then, Hanghyuk's face turned as serious as a real officer, ordering, "Go now, this is an order." Understanding the situation, the assistant stood at attention, saluted in military style, shouted, "Yes," and immediately ran off. Meanwhile, Hanghyuk took a cigarette from his pocket and tried to light it. But his hands began to tremble so much that the cigarette fell to the ground before he could even light it. It turned out that all the brave and strong act was just an outward appearance to encourage the assistant. Because deep down, he was terrified too. Who wouldn't be afraid of death when facing the catastrophe of a dimensional rift? Surprisingly, a soldier nearby pulled out a pack of cigarettes and offered one to him. Praising, "Back Hanghyuk, you're so cool today." Hearing the compliment, the kid calmed down a bit and chuckled, asking, "Are you guys filming?" The soldiers laughed and confirmed it. This statement unexpectedly activated Hanghyuk's superstar skill. His face immediately turned as serious as a born warrior. He raised his hand to light a lighter, put the cigarette in his mouth and started smoking. Then, he told the soldiers that they just needed to take down the monsters that jumped out of the dimensional rift. Meanwhile, holding the stabilization device, a rather clunky-looking machine, he jumped into the dimensional rift. A fierce battle immediately erupted. The soldiers continuously fired at dozens of bat-like and giant reptile-like monsters charging towards them. Among them, a red monster, resembling a prehistoric dinosaur, with glowing red eyes, was charging straight at them. The soldiers kept firing, but they couldn't reload their magazines fast enough. At that moment, a dark shadow appeared right in front of them. The giant red monster approached, raised a huge foot, ready to smash down on the soldier who no longer had the ability to resist. He could only close his eyes and wait for Hades to call his name. But no, a sword was suddenly drawn, and with just one gentle stroke, our protagonist, Sungwoo, had arrived. Appearing like a warrior god, he swung his sword, cutting the red monster in half. Then, Sungwoo calmly sheathed his sword, ignoring the fact that the bright red monster had been chopped into hundreds of pieces. Everyone around was simply stunned. It seemed that these monsters were not worth Sungwoo's time. He did everything as if he were cutting lettuce, causing the soldiers to be unable to believe their eyes. At that moment, a drop of blood flew towards Hanghyuk, but he gently raised his sword to swat it away. With his divine power, the portal problem would be solved by Sungwoo in the blink of an eye.